Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
And you are now officially allowed to tinker because we have the fixtures, James. All of that playing around before. Head over to your FPL teams, click that X on Kevin De Bruyne, click that X on Bruno Fernandes, and find alternatives because they're not playing in game week 1.
Well, that sounds like a great point just to get straight into it. Is that the right thing to do?
We haven't done much in terms of introductions here. I did just jump straight into it there. You're right. Obviously, thank you everybody for listening in again. Episode 2 of the 4th season.
Do a fucking intro then.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's tell everybody who we are and where they can find it. No, we'll do that later, James. People know who we are. They just want to know what we think about the fixtures. And that's what we're going to do in today's episode. We do have the first, we have all the fixtures for the season, postponements, rearrangements aside and what have you. But let's be honest, we know the first couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks are rock solid and then everything goes up in the air from there. This season's going to be more interesting than any other because of the fixture congestion up until Christmas, where if you'll listen to previous pods, you'll know James has talked about how UEFA are trying to get all of the European calendar up to schedule by December, which means a little bit more of a congested European schedule. And then we've got all of the cup competitions, and obviously we're starting the league later anyway. So it'll be very interesting. But having said that, there's no fans to worry about at the moment from what we know. So football will come thick and fast, James. Football will be coming thick and fast.
Indeed. Spurs playing tomorrow. I know. It's like, it kind of feels like it hasn't really stopped. So
is it on any telly?
It's free to access for season ticket holders. So Spurs have got 3 games. We're playing Ipswich tomorrow, Birmingham and Reading next weekend. All at Tottenham. They're free to access for season ticket holders as long as they registered an interest, which obviously I did. So, yeah, be watching Spurs tomorrow. It doesn't feel like that long ago that I was fucking ranting about that second half performance at Crystal Palace. It just feels like last week, basically. So, yeah, and then we're back in it and good to go. I think the number one theme that came out of the fixture announcement yesterday is, right, FPL perspective and hats on. What do we do here with the Man City and Man United boys?
Yes.
That's first thing to cover off. So, is it acceptable to leave the likes of De Bruyne and Bruno Fernandes in your squad for game week 1, prepped and ready to get them in for game week 2? Or obviously the flip of that is you say, right, I'll target Man United in game week 2. They've got Crystal Palace at home. And then I'll target Man City in game week 3. Because, City have got Wolves away in game week 2. And actually it's Leicester in game week 3. You have given City some difficulties in the last few years. And you just wonder if it's easier to skip City a little bit longer, but the explosiveness on City is, De Bruyne is any game in the sense that, he can hit a double point haul against Liverpool or Fulham. It doesn't make any difference for him. How long do you want to go without it? So it's really going to be interesting to see how people manage this. I think a lot of people manage this in the idea that a lot of people are already thinking, I'm going to wildcard game week 2 or 3, That's what's already in a lot of people's thoughts. And I'm strongly of the opinion that I want to go the complete opposite of that and hold that first wild card back as late as possible.
Yeah. In your original draft, James, how many United and United and City players, and let's not disregard Burnley defensively, people would have gone for.
That's true.
And Aston Villa less so, but if that's your thing, there might be some Villa players knocking around that might be cheap budget options. But City and United being the big two, how many players did you have originally in your draft?
Originally? If you include Burnley, 4. So right, Charlie Taylor, De Bruyne, Fernandes and Martial. So 4. So that's obviously completely unmanageable. And this is why it was never worth worrying about it too much till we got these fixtures and knew officially what was happening. I think...
I was on 4 as well. But I had Kevin De Bruyne and then 3 United players in Fernandes and Martial and Greenwood. So yeah, I was on all of those. But now Greenwood was always there just to wait and see what happens. Should Sancho sign? That's a bit of a tongue twister to get at. Should Sancho sign?
Yes.
We got there. He would have gone anyway, and I would have potentially downgraded him to upgrade Keenan Davis from Aston Villa to a 6.5.
Who's also not playing now as well.
Exactly. So he's on his way. So those two can go straight away. That's fine. With Anthony Martial, I have a very easy sideways move that I can make to Raul Jimenez, who, despite that City fixture in game week 2, the fixtures either side of it. I mean, Sheffield United and then West Ham, Fulham, Leeds, Newcastle, tasty. So I don't mind that sideways move. But it then means I may not go back to Martial for 6 or 7 weeks. So that's fine. I can maneuver that. And I feel like to bench 2 is okay. But more than that is a bit difficult.
The problem with that is everyone wants to start with, say, a 4.0 defender or a 4.5 million midfielder. And if that's the way you're going, I think it's probably maximum 1. I think the best way to manage this is probably take 1. Do you need 3 substitutes at the start? I think putting 1 in is okay. The one you know you want the most from those 2 teams. And I suspect you're probably going to be better off leaving the Manchester United asset in there, actually. And then I actually think aggressive hits from game weeks 2, game weeks 3. I see an interesting idea yesterday that someone had, which was the idea of not setting up a game week 1 team. Sorry, too late. You've already done it. Mm-hmm. And just starting from game week 2. And then you can go with 5 or 6 Man City, Man United players, and you're missing out on game week 1. There's obviously advantages in that. The big disadvantage is you're going to lose out on a lot of fucking points, quite possibly. And I just think it would be better to bank the points from game week 1 with a fairly strong team and just take hits to get to what you want to get to if you want to. I mean, for example, the flip of Aubameyang's got great first 2 fixtures, right? You're looking at Fulham away, West Ham at home. The closer we get to the deadline, the more and more popular he's going to be because you could captain him quite feasibly in those 2 fixtures. Mm-hmm. Then it's Liverpool, Sheffield United, Man City, Leicester. And talking about, like I said, so if you're balancing like that to go, okay, Aubameyang, right, now's my City move in game week 3, for example. You could even look at Liverpool, game week 1, playing Leeds, which, by the way, it's not necessarily an easy fixture, guys. Then it's Chelsea and Arsenal. So then that might be the one we go, right, I'm going Liverpool to Manchester United in game week 2. Mm-hmm. So if you can preset these kind of ideas and plans in your mind and figure out what's best for you, then I would go down that route. I think I will probably start with 1 Manchester United player and leave it on the bench. And I think that's probably going to be it. I think that's my first thought process on that. In terms of when will the games, City, Villa and Burnley United, when will they be rescheduled? There is a tiny possibility that it could rock up into game week 3. It is ridiculously tiny. Essentially, it would need Burnley and Manchester United to both not make the 4th round of the Carabao Cup, for example, and for it to be announced at 1 week notice. Now, that's possible because obviously, from a fan perspective, that doesn't matter. And also, the clubs will be preset in their mind thinking they are going to play in that midweek should they make the Carabao Cup 4th round, for example. So there is a small possibility it could go in there. I definitely would not bank on that as an idea. It's very unlikely. And it's most likely the rearranged fixtures will go into 18 or 19, we think. Game week 16 is also a possibility. But it's not going to be for a while. There's literally, because they're both in Europe, and we know they're both automatically in the Champions League, there is no room for it. This year, once the Champions League starts up in, after game week 5, it's every week. There's no 2-week space in between Champions League fixtures. It's midweek, international break. Midweek, done. That's it. So there's no room to be fitting it in any time earlier.
What are your thoughts overall? Let's look at some of these teams, but let's start with the 2 that matter the most, James, which is our own. Are you happy with Spurs' start to the season? Are you happy with that fixture?
The first thing to say is everyone's got to play everyone 38 times, twice over 38 games. So I don't tend to read too much into that sort of thing.
I don't know. You know, if say we had to play a team. Like look at our run, right? If we end up bottom of the table by October, which I know you mentioned could happen in your live stream yesterday, I was listening, but then it just puts another level of pressure onto the matches. Whereas if you start well, then suddenly you play with a little bit of freedom. And I know that the pressure from the fans is not going to be there, but it definitely has an impact at the lower half of the table where scoreboard pressure can have an impact on how teams perform. But also, I agree with you. Like everyone's got to play each other twice. Like do your best and play your best in every single game, and it should sort itself out. So yeah, Everton at home, Newcastle at home, West Ham at home in the first six, Southampton, Man United, and Burnley away.
Yeah, I mean the first 8 fixtures, Brighton at home, West Brom away are 7 and 8. The first 8 fixtures, we only played one of the so-called Big Six, which is Manchester United away. There's no Wolves or Leicester in that period either. And in the final 10 fixtures as well, we only played Manchester United again from the Big Six, although Leicester and Wolves are both in the running this time. So great start and a great end. It looks like a very fucked up middle, I must say. I mean, Jesus, from game week 9 to game week 15, we play City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Palace away, Liverpool, Leicester, Wolves. That game week 9 to 15 is absolute murder. So the middle of the season's tough. The winter period is going to be very difficult. I tweeted once I'd seen the fixtures to say, once we get to game week 9, when we play Man City, we have to be in the top 4. No more excuses now. Just get the job done. And if it's for him in charge, if it's getting the job done by his philosophy, fine, get it done by his philosophy. We must be in the top 4 when we get to game week 9 to have a chance of being in it, I think. So, yeah, it's a decent start. And obviously, to be honest, looking around the Twitter community yesterday, it felt like all the rage that people were suddenly moving to Spurs. And I'm thinking, this is the worst fucking possible thing for me. Because the amount of repetitive questions. And if I get a bit ratty with people, I'm sorry, I don't mean to. I just get sick of repeating myself. So let me make it real clear. Go and get Harry Kane if you want Harry Kane. Harry Kane will score in 70% of games. He, in my opinion, probably won't be explosive enough to be a regular captain. But if you want him with that fixture run, great, go and get him. Heung-min Son is brilliantly priced at 9 million. He scored double returns for goals and assists last season. He's capable of repeating it. For me, he will frustrate the life out of you because there's a lot of games where he'll be hugged to the touchline, but he's still capable of explosiveness. If you want to go and get him, it's fine. Go and get him. Defensively, the standout pick is Eric Dyer. I listened to so much nonsense yesterday about Spurs playing back threes and stuff like that. Spurs will start the season with a back 4. Eric Dyer will be the first choice centre-half. He will be favoured over Alderweireld, I think, is second choice, and Davinson Sanchez is third choice. Eric Dyer, at the moment, unless Spurs add, is Mourinho's man until something changes his mind. I would favour Eric Dyer over Ben Davies. If you want to go with Ben Davies as a preference, I don't have an issue with that. Do not look at anything else from Spurs to try and be clever. Your Bergwijns, your Dele Allis, all that sort of stuff, in my opinion, don't bother. The only other one, if you want to pay the extra for Hugo Lloris, I don't actually mind it because he will make a lot of saves next season. That's it. We don't need to speak about Spurs again.
People only listen to us for that anyway, James. So that was a good, nice.
Good night, everyone. Thanks very much.
Yeah, 14 minutes, job done.
That's my opinion. My opinion is not going to change.
No,
and in
Eric
the next
Dyer,
2 weeks at least.
Eric Dyer was in my provisional squad as, I wouldn't call him a placeholder, but had the fixtures come out nice for Spurs, he would have stayed in. He's staying in now for sure for me. And Harry Kane is definitely a possibility. Martial to Harry Kane is something I could do with the money left over from Mason Greenwood being downgraded. It's definitely not out of the realms of contention that I could do that.
I think Dyer is a great shout. I, to clarify, won't be going for any Spurs players because it's not good for my mental health. And I'm just better off trying to enjoy and watching Spurs, which is difficult enough as it is, without having their FPL assets in my side as well. So look, if Kane goes off and I haven't got him, trust me, I'll still be happy. It won't bother me. Yeah. I think Kane and Dyer particularly are standouts. Kane's price is great. It's very attractive. It's with him. I think we kind of undervalue his consistency a little bit. Do we, for example, if you're pairing him to get him in the team with the likes of, I don't know, let's say Aubameyang and De Bruyne, for example, do you need to captain him? Is that essential? Oh, fuck, I just used that word that's banned. What I mean is it essential that you have to be captaining him to have him in your team? That's a
No,
different
whereas last
conversation.
year when he was a bit more expensive, it was a case of why am I going to spend that money on someone that I'm not going to necessarily
I think so.
catch?
Is 10.5 million an absolute must to
No,
captain?
no.
I think it's probably not. It's just lent that way just enough now where I think you can have him and you don't have to captain him. And that's why it might flip for people. I think Dyer is genuinely, I think he's a brilliant choice. I think he's the best 5 million defender in the game.
Let's talk about my guys in East London. What a dog of a start that we've been given this season.
Well, when I said that you'll be bottom after about 8 game weeks, or
not a joke.
you'll do well not to. Actually, yeah, it's not a joke.
Newcastle first game of the season, followed by Arsenal, Wolves, Leicester, Tottenham, City, Liverpool. Ouch. They just lined up the top 6 or 7, and just the only one missing is Manchester United in there, and there to follow not too far after. Horrible start.
You do have the flip of Spurs in the sense that, I mean,
from November onwards, it's a really nice period.
Your January is very good actually. Your February is not too bad either. Your January finishes with Liverpool, but otherwise your January to February period is very strong actually, and your running isn't bad either. You also, I think you got United and Arsenal 28, 29. Other than that, the running looks quite strong. So if you are in the shit at the end, there's plenty of manoeuvre to get around that base. You got Chelsea in 33 at home, but I mean, you're capable of beating them as shown last season. How many West Ham players do you think are currently in my squad, Suj, bearing in mind that opening start of the season?
2.
3.
I've got 2, and I've got gaps for the other. This is you talked about owning Tottenham players is not good for your mental health, and I'm less like it's a different kettle of fish supporting West Ham to supporting Spurs and having assets in your team because of the price points and stuff. But I still looked at my provisional squad, which is up on the screen in front of me, thinking with that start, how have I still got 2 West Ham players in my squad? Souček is in there regardless, I'm assuming, and Ben Johnson is in there regardless. So your third West Ham player, are you still sticking with Antonio then?
Yeah, I think so at the moment. Yeah, because Antonio, it doesn't bother me on the fixtures. And actually, if I just break it down to a shorter, Newcastle, good.
Yes.
Arsenal, it's all right, actually.
Yeah.
Wolves, not ideal. Leicester, okay. Tottenham even.
But both are away.
Okay.
Leicester and Tottenham are both
Does
away.
that matter so much?
No.
Antonio has a historical record of being able to score in these sort of games. And I just feel like that's a position that I want to get right. And it was kind of a him or Chris Wood kind of choice for the start.
It is. Yeah.
So do I want Antonio at the start when he's got a game against Newcastle, whereas Chris Wood doesn't? And all right, then Wood comes into Leicester and Antonio comes into Arsenal. Actually, for the starting point, and those thinking wild card early in sort of game week 3, I still think Antonio's a great shout. And I think he might be for me as well. I'm not so bothered about the fixtures with him specifically. Souček for myself in my planning structure is likely to be the 5th choice midfielder. So if he sits there ready for me and comes in and gets to 2 pointers and is capable of attacking returns, I still think even with the fixtures, he's the best choice at 5 million or below. And I think Johnson, the more I think about it, is probably the best choice 4.0, and at least until we have a better understanding of what's happening with Palace. Now, either way, this guy's not going to be starting for me regularly. I might throw him in for that game week 1 fixture against Newcastle, for example. But otherwise, he's going to be sitting last on the bench, isn't he? So it's not too much of a problem. That one at 4.0, I want to pick the guy who's going to shoot in the value. It's the one where I want the value more than the actual points, because I don't want to be scrambling for it. And I think Johnson is likely to be the one that pops up. But I don't see between him and Mitchell and Ferguson at Palace, I don't see either of them doing the bits that would become a new Lundstrom or a new Wan-Bissaka, for example. I just don't see that sort of player from those three guys or any of the other 4.0s. So if he sits there, he sits there. I'm all right with it. And so oddly enough, I think it's more a case of me looking at long-term thinking and just saying, those three West Ham guys have got a brilliant price. I'm certain that I won't start with all three, I think, because I don't want to block myself. I wouldn't want to be in a position where suddenly I'm into game week 3 or 4 and I'm thinking, fucking hell, Jared Bowen's going mental here. And we like him as a player, right?
Yeah.
So I
good.
don't really want to start with 3 players from any particular team. So I'm sure that will change, but I do think those 3 players are still a great price, mate.
You could easily go into game week 1 with a very good squad. Like you could have your double Liverpool defense in Robertson and Trent. You could have one of Aubameyang, Salah, or Mane. A Souček, Antonio, Kane, Ings, Armstrong, Doherty, Jimenez. There is enough talent out there that you can easily put together a squad without City or United. So yeah, going to be very interesting to see how many players are left in. Because I would have left Bruno, at the moment as it stands, I would have left Bruno Fernandes as my United player on the bench.
That's the one I've got in. I'm highly amused looking through comments about Bruno Fernandes at the moment, because I feel like you've got XG crowd and non-XG crowd. The XG crowd know that he's absolutely been overperforming his statistics. Are the penalties sustainable, etc.? And then the flip of it going, well, this guy's the fucking hub of the team. I can see that every time I watch them play.
Eye test is
and so for me, I'm liable to lean that way, but I do want Martial as well. So it's not definite that Fernandes will be there. There's room to fit both of them in, not necessarily in game week 1, but by game week 2, there's room to make it happen, I think. It's another reason why I think people might be looking at people like Kane and Jamie Vardy on opening day as well, to look at going, right, well, they've got home fixtures which are potentially attractive on game week 1, Spurs at home to Everton, Leicester at home to Brighton, and then go, right, I'm shunting that money down now. And it is down to Martial, and then being able to pick up to another midfielder perhaps. So I can see people's thinking there. Martial is very much in my thoughts. I know a lot of people obviously really attracted by Marcus Rashford, especially as he's a midfielder now, and I can completely understand that. Greenwood as well, if they don't add, is still a great asset. So where I don't want to be is I get to game week 2 and I'm sitting there and I'm scrapping around to like get one in. I think I'd rather want one there with the potential to add the second. At least that's where I probably want to be for game week 2. So they're going to be first priority for nearly everybody in game week 2, I think, with considering City are playing Wolves as well and Burnley are playing Leicester. It seems like the obvious one to go, right, this is where I need to steam back into Manchester United assets.
So
go on.
I was just going to say, like, our drafts are still very early stage.
So
I think it's not really valuable for listeners to say who's in our drafts right now. But it is worth talking about the teams and the players that we've selected in the podcast that we put out on Monday, where we did a top to toe, hasn't massively changed. A few new additions into the game that have come in now. The boy at West Brom's in the game at 6 million that you mentioned, and
Matthias Pereira, that's a good price.
And so on, and then there will be signings joining the game as and when they. Has Joe Hart got a price yet?
Yeah, and Cole Norbury decided to ask twice during my stream yesterday if he should consider him at 4.5 million. I realised when he asked the second time that he actually wasn't joking. First time I didn't dignify an answer. Shout out, Kyle. But no, my God, no. Joe Hart is in as an understudy, a second or third choice. There is zero doubt that Hugo Lloris will start the season as long as he's fit. Zero doubt about that. In terms of players that are definitely in my game week 1 team, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson. That's all I definitely know at the moment. I'm pretty sure that Danny Ings will be in there as well. I feel like Southampton assets were one that really got firmed up in my mind on the fixtures yesterday. Opening start of Palace, Tottenham, Burnley, West Brom in the first 4 is okay. Chelsea, Everton, Villa, Newcastle in the next 4. That sounds like a good opening 8 fixtures for me. Really good. They're interestingly Southampton. Our Stato correspondent FPL Canal highlighted a couple of interesting things on the fixtures yesterday. Southampton have the smallest distance between playing Big Six, the
Yep.
so-called Big Six. We're
Yep.
putting Arsenal in, excluding Leicester. The maximum distance they have between playing a team from the Big Six is 4 games at any point in the system. They don't in the season. They don't have a run of more than 4 games. The team that has the longest stretch without playing one of the Big Six is Fulham.
9 games, right? I think they have.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Fulham is when that arrives, because it's early, it's between game weeks 2 and game weeks 9. So they start with Arsenal. Sorry, game week 2 and game week 10.
Yep.
You start with Arsenal, then they've got Leeds, Villa, Wolves, Sheffield United, Palace, West Brom, West Ham, Everton, and Leicester before walking into Manchester City and Liverpool back to back.
Why do we always get City and Liverpool back to back? The number of times we've got them back to back, it's annoying.
Shit happens.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, side rant there.
But the point being is, I wonder even with that. So looking at Antonio's first fixture, liking it, not necessarily liking Mitrovic's, do I want to be blocked in with 3 West Ham players at the start? Mitrovic is right back on my radar, right back on it, because those opening fixtures are all right, and I'm not going to be blinded with Fulham to look anywhere but him if he's interested. Even Joe Bryan, who's the high scoring defender, highest priced at 5 million, who scored twice in the playoff final. If people are thinking that way, they've just bought Robinson from Wigan, who's another left back, so that's even questionable now as well. It's literally, for me, only Mitrovic if I want to look at them for them 9 fixtures. And I wonder then, is it worth having him against Arsenal? It's not the worst fixture in the world.
Yeah, I mean, if you think
Mitrovic
against Arsenal, who defensively can have an off day, especially if Sideshow Bob's there, versus Antonio against Newcastle, who last season were pretty stubborn in various games. And then you've got to factor in, James, if in game week 2 and 3 you're aggressively taking hits, and to get from Antonio to Mitrovic is a 4-point hit. Is Antonio gonna outscore Mitrovic by more than 4 points in game week 1, or just ride Mitrovic out against Arsenal and
you know what the problem is with Mitrovic? It's exactly the same problem I had with Wilfried Zaha last December. If he goes in, he's staying in for that period for me. I'm going to trust it all the way through, so, and that makes me not want to do it.
Yeah. So the thing here is now we can talk about which specific players from which teams and things. It's a bit of a philosophical debate on strategy. So 2 players that are in my draft right now as replacements for United and City assets would be Aubameyang for Kevin De Bruyne is a very good and easy option, especially for the first couple of game weeks. Harry Kane coming in for Martial, also straightforward enough. Now I'd have to take I'll have to cut a few corners elsewhere to allow those little price increases, but I can do it. Now, if Aubameyang does well and Kane does well in the first couple of game weeks, I'm the type of FPL manager that doesn't like getting rid of players that have been doing well for me. When a player's in form, I'll ride out that trend. If you're adopting a strategy where you're going to have other players in for your City and United assets, and you're the type of manager that likes to plan and stick with the plan, Aubameyang does well in the first couple. Are you going to move him on for Kevin De Bruyne or a City asset, or are you going to let him ride it out? And I think it's very important for people to decide in advance, because it's going to be very difficult in the moment. I think
can I be honest?
Plan and stick to it.
If I start with Aubameyang, which is looking highly likely at the moment,
over Kevin De Bruyne or Sterling or whoever.
Yeah. To be honest, becoming the number 1 choice from an attacking perspective for me with those first 2 fixtures, he can cover the captaincy both of those first 2 game weeks, in my opinion. If Aubameyang scored 5 goals in those first 2 games, I would be even more inclined to sell him.
Good.
Even more. Yeah, and I'd stick to the plan even more. Whereas, do you know what? If he blanked, I'd think, do you know what? This guy is so consistent. And his numbers prove that, right? 22 goals, both for the last his 2 full seasons with Arsenal. I think, well, his consistency is going to come even in the big fixtures. Whereas I think if he bangs in the first 2, I wouldn't be thinking, oh my God, his price is going to like smash up. I'd be looking at it and going, right, he's got Liverpool this weekend. Now's the right time for me to move. He's got Man City in 3 game weeks as well. Not be blinded by form so much. If I had that set plan in my mind, great. There are other people who right now will be thinking, I'm keeping Aubameyang all the way through. And that's absolutely fine, by the way. I'm just saying, if I had that pre-set plan in my mind, which is probably where I'm leaning at the moment, then yeah, he's coming out after the West Ham fixture in game week 2, irrespective of what he does in those 2 games, because I would definitely prefer to have Kevin De Bruyne against Leicester than Aubameyang against Liverpool. That's exactly how I would feel about it.
And I think I'm the same as well. I think I need to get into the mindset of pre-planning what I want to do in those opening few weeks. Now, of course, we know that there's going to be other variables, so we don't know how Arsenal are going to line up necessarily. Whether Aubameyang is going to be through the middle or on the left. Now, if he plays through the middle and then Willian comes in as a number 10, for example, and they strike up a great chemistry, you might think, actually, you know what? The eye test here is these guys are on fire and playing well, and they've got a good chemistry, and interlinking play is good. I might stick with him, or you might see something that could cause Liverpool or City problems if they're getting in behind quite a lot all of a sudden. So there are things that can happen that will change your mindset potentially. But yeah, this is the challenge I think is going to be for a lot of people. Once you start with somebody and they do well, then moving on from them to get back to United and City is going to be difficult. But remember what you're moving to, which is some incredible attacking assets at United and City here.
Yeah, agreed.
Post-lockdown, those guys were incredible.
The planning of the transfers between the top assets is now even easier because of the similarity in price. You've got De Bruyne, Sterling, Salah and Aubameyang all within 0.5 of each other. They're probably all likely to stay within about $1 million of each other for the season, right? You've got that $1 million going spare from your cheapest to your top. At any point, you can just swing in and out. Mm-hmm. If that's the way you want to go, if you only want to go with one of them. And I think most people are going to try and fit in 2, is worth saying. But if you're only trying to fit in 1, I think it's okay to take that swing between City, Arsenal and Liverpool. Yep. It's okay to swing like that. Absolutely fine. Was there anyone from the fixtures that come out yesterday in terms of a team you thought, oh, they're back on my radar now, or they've dropped off it completely? Because I didn't actually feel there was too much in the fixtures yesterday that influenced my thinking, because I found, looking at the opening period of sort of first 6 through all the teams, everybody seems to have a difficult fixture in there somewhere. There wasn't the most blindingly obvious one in terms of sustained period was Tottenham's first 8 and yours, your first 7 or so.
As being polar opposites,
were genuinely the 2 that really stood out like a sore thumb. Say, that's great, that's bad. And even though yours is the worst, I'm still sitting here and going, well, the value in the likes of Antonio, Souček and possibly Johnson is still great. So I don't feel like I've been influenced that much. Southampton, as I said, are one that I think a little bit more on my radar. One of the interesting ones I'm going to talk about was Everton, because they've had quite a bit of mention, and they were the one team on Monday where I went, bar the promoted clubs, them and Palace are probably the 2 that I couldn't give a shit what their fixtures are. And I knew as soon as I said that, they'd end up getting us game week 1. It was almost a certainty. Tottenham, West Brom, Palace, Brighton is a very good first 4.
Not bad. I agree with you on that. Liverpool, Southampton to follow. Yeah, it's not bad. Brighton and Southampton can give Everton a good game. They're not any more on my radar necessarily. Burnley was a bit of one that stood out a little bit. It was a bit of a tough one that they're not playing in game week 1. I'd be interested in what you think you'll do with Charlie Taylor now. But that Southampton, Newcastle, West Brom run after game week 2, they could still keep clean sheets. Like if I had a Burnley defensive asset, the Newcastle West Brom games, I'd be inclined to potentially play them. So that Burnley seemed okay. It seemed fairly decent, but I think you're right in mentioning that it's a mixed bag for everybody. Leeds, I feel for a little bit. I mean, in their first 6, they've got Liverpool, City, and Wolves. That's not easy. But in amongst that, and Sheffield United away as well, who are going to be dog to break down. In amongst that, they got Fulham and Villa, who they would hope to get results. Fulham at home, especially. So Leeds, I feel for a little bit. I think they've got a tough run. They're going to be a watch and wait for me now. I'm not going to be
Agreed.
touching any of them.
Yeah, Leeds start is particularly tough. I think Liverpool, Sheffield United, Man City, and Wolves inside the first five doesn't look great. I feel like that's a learning period for me now. Is what it's going to be. If people particularly want to start with a 4.5 asset or so, I think that's great. But I think when you come to those fixtures, you're going to those particular fixtures, particularly Liverpool, City, Wolves, you're probably going to find it difficult to start with them if you go with, say, the 4.5 defenders. So I think that's a really good period to kind of judge. I wouldn't be surprised if they start well. But I think starting well for Leeds from those first five fixtures would be 7 points would be amazing. They get 7 points from those first five would be a brilliant start considering they've got Liverpool and Manchester City in there. Yep. So they'll give Liverpool a proper game in game week one, but I'm not sure that I want to start with their assets yet. No, exactly. Just interestingly to go back to Everton and Burnley. Everton, my opinion hasn't changed in terms of their assets. I'm not interested. There is one that I've taken a closer look at, which is young Gordon, who's a 4.5 million midfielder. And it's just because if I decide I want to lean into 4.5 million midfielders, he might stand out if he performs okay in the pre-season fixtures. But then I'd be swinging towards him being my third sub every single week. So it doesn't particularly matter.
Fodder he is, yeah.
Yeah. Burnley, the interesting thing with Burnley, having had a look through their full fixtures, is they've got a spread. There isn't a period where you think, oh, that's an amazing period to jump on, or that's a really bad period I need to jump off. So in relation to, say, what you're saying about Charlie Taylor, yeah, I'd like to start with him, but I would probably rather have, if I'm going to have one asset coming into game week 2, and I wouldn't pick Taylor away to Leicester, then I'm definitely going to favour the Manchester United guys. Unless I've got total confidence in the 11 players that I pick are definitely going to start, I would potentially consider going with him as well. But I would have to be so locked in. And I'm not sure that's particularly where I want to be. Remember, we are going back to 3 substitutes again this season. Mm-hmm. So even afterwards, Southampton, it's not particularly the defensive fixture I'm desperate to jump on for them against Danny Ings and the like. So I think Charlie Taylor's probably something to come back to, actually, or go without. Interesting to see what those other people are thinking. Obviously, with him, with Nick Pope as well. I think a lot of people were already set on the idea of Chris Wood because his minutes per returns is very good. I think most people will just ignore it because of what comes immediately afterwards in Leicester and Southampton, rather than leaving it there on the bench. You're brave if you go down that route of, say, I don't know, leaving Fernandes, Martial and Charlie Taylor on the bench game week 1. That's a brave strategy if you go down that route, and I wouldn't advise it.
Another a team that we talked about as assets that are probably fairly priced, which makes them difficult to get to, but have an interesting run, is Sheffield United. Now, they're opening 6 fixtures in amongst there. They've got Wolves, Leeds and Fulham at home and Aston Villa away. Now, the Aston Villa away and Leeds and Fulham at home games seem like great opportunities for clean sheets. Wolves at home might be an opportunity for a clean sheet as well. I know that Sheffield United Wolves game, one thing it's not going to be is a 4-3. It's going to be low scoring, in my opinion. So Ramsdale's joined the game at 5 million. I don't know if he'd have joined at 4.5, I'd have been all over that straight away.
Great. Of course, yeah.
5 million's given us a decision to make. I don't really want to be moving my goalkeeper around, but if I can see 3 or 4 clean sheets in the first 6 coming for Sheffield United potentially, they seem defensively like one I want to consider. Like Aston Villa, Leeds, Fulham, I think they could keep clean sheets in 3 out of the first 5. And Wolves,
kept a clean sheet in that fixture last year, and all right, Arsenal's a difficult fixture, but it's not the worst fixture. I think, by the way, Ramsdale might be my starting Sky goalkeeper, but keep it under your hat. I think that's a good spot, Suj, in terms of what they've got there, can show for early defensive returns. For those who are thinking of that early wild card game weeks 3 or 4, genuinely get one.
I think they'll end up being differentials as well. I don't think because of their prices, too many people have jumped on them. At the moment, I'm just looking at teams selected by right now.
There won't be a lot of interest.
Yeah, nothing. If you're talking about, goalkeepers 2.9%, but they're never highly owned. Egan is high at 17.3, followed by Baldock at 5.8, and then everybody else is 5% or less owned right now. So there could be some differentials in that defense that other people won't be jumping on particularly quickly. I don't mind that. I mean, Matt Doherty's in my squad right now, and I've got Trent, Robbo, Dyer, Doherty, and I need a little bit of money to free up elsewhere. So if I need to find a million, going from Doherty, excuse me, to Basham or O'Connell at 5 million might be the way I go, or Egan might be the way I go.
I'd be very surprised if I don't start with Doherty, or however you pronounce his name. Sorry to the Irish listeners.
Doherty.
Listen, guys, I'm never going to get it right. I'm so sorry. Sheffield United, Man City, first 2 game weeks, I think it's going to put quite a few people off Wolves' assets. Just take a little look further ahead. West Ham, Fulham, Leeds, Newcastle afterwards is really appealing. And with someone like the Irish wingback, I definitely don't want to be coming back to it in game week 3. He'll just go there from the start, I think, mate. So they've got a very good run of fixtures, Wolves, after the first 2.
Can I ask, James, what formation do you think you'll be playing most of the time? A 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2?
I think probably, yes, probably 3-4-3 for me, because I think, yes.
Two bench fodder defenders in Charlie Taylor and Ben Johnson. They're not bench fodder, but you know what I mean.
Vinagre is the one there at the moment. If Wolves don't add another one, I think it's still fine. But I think, for example, someone could develop from Arsenal's defensive assets at 4.5 million, or Holding. Yeah, there's a couple of that might develop, and we'll have with Arsenal as well. You got the benefit of the Community Shield next Sunday. That's going to give us some clues potentially as well.
Mm.
On Wolves, though, I just wonder if it might get overlooked. I mean, Doherty's ownership at the moment, 21.8%. Even looking beyond the first 6, is Crystal Palace in game week 7, Leicester, Southampton afterwards. Yeah, I want a bit of Wolves. I want a bit of Wolves. So to go back to the point on the formation 3-4-3, there's obviously so much talk of fitting in these power midfielders, and I completely understand that, and it's fine. I just think there are so many good price forwards.
Agreed.
That I want 3 of them.
3 of them up
really
front.
Want that.
The reason I touched on the formation there, where we talk about Doherty, is my back 5 at the moment has Trent and Robbo, Dyer and Doherty, which is 4 playing defenders. And if I want to go down a 3-4-3 formation, then I have to sacrifice either Dyer or Doherty. And Dyer's at 5 million, Doherty at 6 million. I think I can save a little bit of money there. But I wouldn't even mind coming back to Doherty later. For me, it's not such a problem to go back later.
There are so many good choices in this game in respect of going back to Monday's point that a lot of the players in the game are underpriced. Not picking Spurs players is just even better for me because I've only got 19 teams to pick from rather than 20. So I can rule out Kane, Son, Dyer, fantastic. I definitely want a bit of Wolves. I'd be really surprised if I don't start with Doherty. I've got complete faith in him as an asset.
Oh, yeah.
Well, would it shock you if they kept a clean sheet against Sheffield United and he scored against Man City?
No, not at all. Nothing will shock me with Matt Doherty.
So I'll go. His ownership's 20% at the moment, so the interest is obviously still there. I think he's one of the best price players in the whole game in terms of, I said on Monday, the fact that he didn't get a price increase, I was stunned at. You know, he finished last season at 6.5 million and people were still buying him. And he started this season the same price he was at the start of last season. Almost a no-brainer. The only thing that's going to put people off is Vinagre at 1.5 million cheaper. Yeah, there's a solution for that. If Wolves don't buy a left back, consider both.
Yeah. There's no issue with doubling up with those guys at all.
One really to watch in the opening weeks, and I think you might see people get drawn to him in the next few weeks in the run-up, is one we already mentioned, is Mateus Pereira at West Bromwich Albion, who's come in at 6 million. It's a very, very interesting price. His signing got confirmed basically literally as we turned the mics off on Monday, mate.
Yep.
They've got Leicester, Everton, Chelsea, Southampton, the first 4. It's not great, but it's not awful either. And if he's going to kind of turn out to be their talisman, which unusually for a midfielder, he might actually turn out to be, I can see people getting drawn to him at 6 million as a midfielder, you know. I'll fit him in. I'll take a chance on him. I think he's one where people are going to lean into taking a punt on him, actually. I think it's more one to watch personally. But if it works for your setup, he might even be the best at that price. Amazingly, he might be. There isn't
Yeah,
a plethora of brilliant choices at 6
it
million
depends
midfield.
if yeah, there isn't. It depends if you want to just go that 500,000 cheaper. I would prefer Saint Maximan or Stuart Armstrong at 5.5 million than I would Pereira at 6, having not seen how he adapts to the Premier League yet. I wouldn't talk anyone out of it because I think with some of these new players into the league, if you're ballsy enough to go in early, you can do well. And he's one of those that could really kick off. But for me, I'm going to take the safer option, which is going to be Armstrong, as opposed to anyone else, even Saint Maximin.
I think those who are trying to force in, say, Aubameyang and Salah at the start are going to find they end up looking at a midfielder around about 6 million value. And I'm going to pick out a couple who I think might be worth considering at that value. For example, Trossard at Brighton, Dwight McNeil at Burnley, Almiron at Newcastle, James Ward-Prowse, Southampton.
Mm.
They're probably the best choices at 6 million. I think from them, I'd be picking Pereira.
Yeah, you got to have a bit of fun with your team, and one or two of your picks have to be a little bit more aggressive, I would say. Otherwise, you're never going to go anywhere. So yeah, I'm up for that.
I thought when I saw the prices of the rest of their team that he was going to come in at 6.5 million, but I obviously should have known that he would be underpriced, and it might well be turn out that he's underpriced. I think he's probably at that 6 million midfield value is probably the best shout.
Yeah. Any other fixtures, James, that we want to talk about, or can we, shall we, should we possibly, maybe even answer a couple of Twitter questions?
Yeah, just one more to mention for me really is Chelsea. Decent start. There is Liverpool and Manchester United in the first 6, but it looks like a good run overall. If we have a look through, so you've got Brighton in game week 1. They've got West Brom, Palace, Southampton between 3 and 5. And then Burnley, Sheffield United, Newcastle 7 to 9. So decent opening run of fixtures for Chelsea. There will be plenty of interest in them. I'm taking a watch. I like from the fact that I'm probably going to go without them, that they've got Liverpool in game week 2. The fact that they're playing Brighton in game week 1, we assume is now going to be on the Monday. I'm probably going to get those 2 full games of fairly difficult fixtures for Chelsea, Brighton away, Liverpool at home, to get a real proper look at them first before obviously that 3-game period of West Brom, Palace and Southampton that might come back around, or that longer period of 3 to game week 9 and beyond if you want to look longer. So I think I'll probably go without. I want to watch them. I want to watch them to get the proper idea. Brighton, I think, will improve this year, as you know. So I think Brighton and Liverpool, 2 fixtures at the start, it gives me a real good chance to watch them and assess, particularly on Werner and what his role within that team is going to be.
Yeah,
I can't, personally, I can't do anything about it till I know that, I don't think.
Right, let's go into some Twitter questions, James. We've got a handful to get through, which will fit in nicely with our show. FPL Wilson, some of these are a little repetitive that we talked about, so I'll give you a shout out anyway. FPL Wilson, best striker in that 6.5 to 6 for the upcoming fixtures.
What's upcoming mean?
Wow, that's a good question.
The friendlies?
I'm liking the look of Che Adams, Mitrovic, and even Ayew between game week 5 and 13.
I've gone cold on the idea of Che Adams a bit because I've just got hot.
You realised that it was...
It's not that. I said to you that I wouldn't rule out starting with the 2 of them, but I feel like my opinion strengthened on Danny Ings. And even them fixtures with Antonio hasn't put me off. The idea of a Mitrovic is the same price as Adams, and I know Mitrovic is going to be the man at Fulham if they have a good performer, basically. So I think if I'm looking Mitrovic versus Adams, I'm probably leaning into Mitrovic now, but it would be Mitrovic probably with Danny Ings, for example, if I was to go down that route. So wouldn't rule him out. If anybody needs to make a cut saving of kind of 2.5 million, that's not the worst one to do, because I do think he will cement his place as Danny Ings' partner this year, and he's a good player. He's someone I've followed, as I've mentioned a number of times, throughout his last sort of 5 years or so of his career. And I think he'll go on to be a good Premier League forward.
FPL Tractor. We've talked about this, so I'll just give you a shout out, Tractor. Leave out Manchester United and Manchester City to begin with, or try and sneak them in gradually. You're going to end up leaving at least one in, maybe 1 or 2.
The better the balance of your squad, the easier it's going to be to stick 1 or 2 in. For those who are fighting for 4.0 defenders and stuff like that, you're going to find it more difficult to go with them at the start. So do you want to sacrifice a little bit in price and get good playing substitutes from the start who you're going to need to use in game week 1? Or are you determined that you've got to have the 4.0 defender or the 4.5 million midfielder or forward, for example? If that's what you're determined to do, you are going to find it more difficult to stick, say, 2 of them in.
We have another question from FPL Wilson. Which teams are you looking to target early on based on fixtures? Any teams that you wouldn't normally target but have changed that? And he's mentioned Spurs, Leicester, Saints, etc. I think Spurs is the one for me that Eric Dyer is probably cementing his space in my team.
Leicester, we haven't really spoken about. West Brom, Burnley, Man City, West Ham, Villa, Arsenal, the first 6. I think for me, just on Leicester, it's more the back end of last season. What I watched in lockdown. I can completely understand if people want to start with Jamie Vardy. I said earlier they got Brighton at home first game. What was I talking about? It's West Brom away, isn't it? I would only start with Vardy. If I was going to start with, I would literally power into their main guy, and then, like I said, make that move towards sort of Martial the next game week or 2. That would probably be part of my thinking. I don't anticipate starting with Leicester assets. As I said previously, I'd look for the attacking ones. So look at Barnes, Maddison as alternatives. Defensively, genuinely, I wouldn't go near them. You asked about 4.5 million assets earlier. Justin and potentially Luke Thomas, if Ben Chilwell will go to Chelsea, both stand out as potential great 4.5 million attacking fullback options. I wouldn't be interested.
Don't want either of them. No.
I wouldn't be interested. I actually think it's the first 2 fixtures sucking a lot of people in. West Brom, Burnley, because if you West Brom and you think in your mind Tony Pulis, Burnley, Sean, you think it's 2 potential clean sheets there, isn't there? West Ham in a full fixture. Suddenly you're breaking it down and going, yeah, there might be good returns in there. And you're right, there might be good returns in there. I just don't want to go near it. I would have no trust in them defensively at the moment. Johnny Evans suspended as well for the first few games. I wouldn't want an FPL asset in my team if Wes Morgan or Bennett are playing at centre half, genuinely. So it'll be an avoid for me, because at the moment, as it stands, one of them 2 is going to start the season.
Yeah. We have a question from Jamin Kisam. Jay, how are we doing? I remember we met at the first ever Planet FPL live meetup. So I hope you're doing well, and I haven't had a question from you in a while, so thank you very much. Do you expect a lot of game week 2 wild cards, James? I think there will be quite a few. I think the answer to that straight up is yes.
I think there's a lot of people even thinking it's all right, I'll go without, and then game week 1 will go badly and they'll just go, fuck it, I'm pulling the trigger on it. So yes, I think there will. If it's right for you, great. I just feel like from an optimal chip strategy perspective, and we'll talk about this on Monday's podcast, which I'm always likely to lean towards, you're going to be better off holding it. And I think a bad game week 1 or bad game week 2 will do you better to hold off the wild card than slam into it and then be in a position where you're thinking, what am I going to do? Because I tell you what you're probably going to do as well is you're probably going to end up using your second wild card in game week 17.
There was it was very dependent on
that's a long period to the end, by the way.
I think we were quite aware that the United City teams weren't going to be playing. It was very dependent on what game week 1 spat out as other alternatives. And I think the Southampton Palace fixture, with the assets they've got, Ings and Armstrong and what have you, spit up some opportunity. Arsenal, Fulham spat out the opportunity. Liverpool, Leeds, Spurs, Everton, even Leicester away at West Brom, Chelsea away at Brighton. There's enough other good games that you can pick enough other good players from that, for me, mean, you might see people completely gravitate away from them. Had everyone else had tough games as well, I think people could have ridden it out. If it was like the most of the big 6 playing each other, then I think it would have been more a case of, you know what, there might be a few 0-0s, 1-1s here, ride it out. But there is some attractive fixtures in game week 1 now, which means it'll be hard to overlook some of these players when the United City assets are not necessarily playing.
Another one that we've not spoken about, which I think people strengthened in their mind in terms of defensive assets, is Southampton. Looking at some, I mean, we mentioned them fixtures. Actually, if you break them down in terms of defensive potential, Palace, good. Tottenham, not bad, because Tottenham will score 1 or 2 or none. Burnley, okay. West Brom, okay. Chelsea, obviously very difficult. They won 2-0 at Stamford Bridge last season. Everton, Villa, Newcastle, Wolves as the first 9. And it's that I understand now why people are looking at the likes of Kyle Walker-Peters and Alex McCarthy as an alternative to Matt Ryan in goal as well. It's something I'm going to have a longer think about, so I might actually come back to that with Southampton defensive. But I've seen a few looking at 2, and I would not go down that route, just 1.
At the moment, Matt Ryan's at 25% ownership, and McCarthy's at 14% ownership. They're the second and fourth most owned goalkeepers, beaten only by Nick Pope, which I think people really want as a set and forget. And Nyland's made its way in between them, but that's because he's 4 million.
I haven't looked at the rotation between the 2 of them, but essentially you could have, from the first 6 games, you could have as opposition, if you rotated Ryan and McCarthy, you could have Southampton versus Palace, then Brighton versus Newcastle, Southampton versus Burnley, Southampton versus West Brom, Brighton versus Palace, Brighton versus West Brom. Suddenly that becomes appealing for the extra 0.5.
Yeah. We now have a question coming in from Matt Derbyshire. Although we have talked about this, Spurs in game week 1, are they? He's used the E word. We're not going to use the E word. I don't think so. But if you can get one into your squad, neither of us are against it. And we've spoken about that at length. Cole JB in the house. How are we doing, Cole? Asking about Kane in quarantine. So Harry Kane's in 2-week quarantine, is he?
So, yeah, you have to be careful the way you read sensationalised headlines. So Harry Kane went to the Bahamas, so he had to quarantine when he come back. So he missed the start of Spurs' training. My understanding is he might even play tomorrow.
Bottom line is, I was out with a few mates yesterday, and if you arrive at the airport, James, I don't know if you know this, you can pay to have a coronavirus test done, which is a whopping £150, but I reckon Mr. Kane can afford it.
Do you think?
And they let you know within 7 hours, and if you're coronavirus clear, you don't have to quarantine. I suspect Harry Kane has had the test, has got the all clear, and won't need to quarantine.
Can I tell you right now that I would pay that £150 myself?
I think a lot of people will.
For him as well, but I would pay it for myself. I would pay Harry. I'll pay you £150 as well. Get a test, get training, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
But I would, I would pay that money. Wouldn't you? Yeah. Or sit there for 2 weeks. No, I'd pay that £150.
It depends. A friend of mine, we were out yesterday. He said that he is working from home anyway, and he's got nowhere to go. He's like, sod it, I'm working from home and I'm just going to be at home for 2 weeks. I probably wouldn't bother. And
if you're in that circumstance, but if you wanted to go out.
Go see family and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you come back from holiday, you probably want to see some family and stuff, don't you? I'd pay the £150, mate.
Yeah. And someone's making money out of this health crisis, because £150 seems a bit steep, but I don't know.
It's supply and demand, mate.
Yes,
supply and demand.
FPL Sammy says, if you had to choose one premium forward to have all season long, who would it be and why? My pick at the moment is Vardy. He's getting on a bit though, isn't he?
All day, every day. The best priced player in the game, Sergio Aguero. I'm so conscious of him.
He's in the back of my mind too.
So conscious. I'm absolutely certain as well that he's going to start with next to no ownership, and people aren't going to move with Wolves and Leicester afterwards as well. I'm so conscious of what's happening with Aguero. He's going to be a brilliant differential. I'm certain of it.
I agree with what James said. I'm going to go slightly different. I'm going to say Harry Kane, just because of what James mentioned there. He scores in 70% of games, and it's that consistency up top that I quite like with having Harry Kane in. More than Aubameyang, I can see Kane being the one that I don't want to hokey-cokey. With Aubameyang, I don't mind hokey-cokeying to Kevin De Bruyne and Salah or whoever else, because I'll probably if I'm hokey-cokeying to them, it's to stick the armband on them. Whereas Kane, I can just leave. I wouldn't be doing a sideways move from Kane to Martial to Captain Martial, or Kane to Vardy to Captain Vardy. I don't see myself doing that, whereas I do see myself moving the captaincy around. So I think Kane might end up being that set and forget.
With Harry, and it was no different in lockdown as well. He'll score as many goals away from home as he scores at home. It's worth remembering that.
Yeah. So many of these questions, James, we'll just give a few shout outs to Taz, Thoughts on an early wild card? We've talked about that to get back the United and City players. And FPL Maz, who also says, "What's your plan on getting City and United players back in?" It's a work in progress at the moment. I think James will be sticking with one. I may be sticking with one or two assets, and then take it from there. Steve Smith at Steacocky says, and this is an interesting, controversial one, James. I think I know your opinion, but I'd like to know.
I like controversial. Go.
Is KDB even worth the money when you probably won't captain him for several game weeks this year? Is he worth the money, James?
What's the next question?
I
think that yes. City's fixtures has strengthened the opinion for De Bruyne versus Sterling. I said this on my stream yesterday. I was sort of hoping, actually, that there was something that would trigger a doubt in my mind. I don't know, to see that City had, some weak opposition at the start, rather than Wolves, Leicester, Arsenal in the first 5, for example. It just strengthened my opinion on De Bruyne. I won't be without that guy for long. Can't be doing it.
There was a shout out to Andy at Let's Talk FPL. He did a predictions video the other day that I was having a brief look at, where people sent in different predictions of what they thought might happen this FPL season. And one of them was about Sterling outscoring Kevin De Bruyne. And it's one that, you know what, I don't think there's going to be much in it. And if you're bold enough to go with Sterling over KDB and get the captaincy right on him, it could end up being a very good move. But there's a lot of ifs and buts in that. So where you're saying is KDB worth the money when you probably won't captain him week in, week out, I'm not as bullish as James, but I think I am erring on the side that I want him over Sterling or anyone else, but I'm not as bullish. I don't mind if someone says to me, I'm going to take Sterling over De Bruyne over the season, and I'm going to put my faith in him to have a better season than he had last season.
I will stand corrected. Someone did correct me from Monday's podcast where I said that he'd outperformed his expected returns last season. He didn't outperform them. Have I said that the right way around? No, sorry, he did outperform them. Sorry.
Scored more goals and created more assists than his XG and XA
he
would
have. He did outperform his expected returns. However, I don't care.
Gareth Lake at FPL Lakey. How are we doing, Gareth? Has asked a question that we're not going to answer, but we are going to answer. And I'll explain to you why, James. After trying to interpret Ben Crellin's amazing spreadsheet, what are your thoughts on a chip plan for blank game week 18, double game week 19, and so on and so on? So
speak to you Monday.
Yeah, exactly.
Ciao for now.
So thank you for the question. But we have a plan to put together a chip special, and it might be back to the chunky chips, curly chips, sweet potato fries, whatever it may be on Monday. So stay tuned, keep your notification bell and all that shit rung so that you get notified.
We'll do a podcast on Monday where the first chunk of it will be something you can potentially listen to at any point between now and kickoff.
Cool. Couple more questions, James, for this week's show. FPL Dipper, thank you for your question. And this one's going to be short and sweet because, thoughts on UEFA's new Europa League 2 Conference League. Teams have to qualify to enter. Will it be something that appeals for teams to go in for the league next season?
We discussed this on our Patrons podcast on Tuesday. Says, do you want to talk about it?
Poo emoji, basically. if I could use emojis in a verbal format, it'd be the poo emoji. What a load of shite.
So for those that missed
devaluing the League Cup.
Correct. The League Cup winners will go into this Europa League 2, if you will, next season, where there'll be one representative from England goes into competition. Kickoffs are scheduled to be 3:45 p.m. on a Thursday. The majority of the teams will be based in Eastern Europe. So you've got the travelling to go with it as well. It's the Europa League Light. Your reward for winning the competition will be to go into next season's Europa League. I mean, wow. Yeah. It sounds like, and I'm sorry, I know we've got loads of Everton followers. We're speaking about this with one of our patrons, Matt Derbyshire, the other day, saying, I could see it being Everton. Although I don't think Everton will necessarily win the League Cup. You can see it being a club like that. Remember, it's worth remembering, obviously, City have won the League Cup every year for what feels like forever. Should they go and win it again, it will filter down into the league. So it could be, had it been implemented this season and the competition was starting this season, Wolves would have been the team through finishing 7th, and obviously Arsenal finishing behind them, winning the FA Cup. It's Wolves that would have gone into that competition. You imagine Mourinho in that competition. Can you imagine how much he would have celebrated when he won it?
Can you imagine? Like, I'm impressed that they've managed to create a cup competition that people will care even less about than the Carling Cup, League Cup, Carabao Cup, whatever cup, Worthington's Milk Cup. Like, you could see, I feel like if you'd build stronger teams in the League Cup than you would going across to Eastern Europe for a fourth round tie against someone we never heard of.
I actually think this will cause an interesting debate in the next couple of years in Europe, and it may take a couple of years to come around, is the idea, not in the Champions League, but in the other European competitions, of regionalised formats. So you would only play teams in
Northern,
the group
Southern
stage
Europe or
that
whatever.
were in.
Yeah.
You've got it. So Central Europe would be together, Eastern Europe, Southern, North. What would we be? West?
North,
I don't know.
I think.
We'd be North. How would we be North? Is that right? I suppose we are. We need to get a globe out.
I think it'd be simple enough just to stick to Northern and Southern Europe.
Does that mean we're just playing Scandinavian teams?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound very exciting.
I'd draw.
That's what I was thinking. Can we butcher us in with like France, Holland, Belgium, Spain, and Portugal for the Europa League, and just play teams from those countries and Scotland if any of them ever qualify? That would be better.
Possibly, maybe. Final question is going to FPL Stefan Barnes, Cy Smith. How much will preseason affect your thinking this year, James?
Not massively. I think it's more on information. The access to games is going to be not great for people in terms of watching games. So look, I've got 3 Spurs games to watch. I don't imagine it will change too much in my thinking, but if it does, I'll let you know in 10 days' time or whatever. I think it's going to be more about information, like literally, so who is playing right back for Palace? Is it Ferguson? Is it Ward? Do they play an equal amount of minutes? Those things.
Where's
probably going to take a little bit of research to find
position out. And that kind of stuff. Like, I'm not sure if apps like SofaScore and Live Score and stuff will cover a lot of the preseason. They're pretty good with the amount of games they do cover, but from a stats point of view, would you get heat maps? Would you get average touch, all of that kind of stuff? Maybe less. No,
you probably won't. So I'd be very cautious of looking at formations on things like sofa scores, etc. You need to get into the detail of what representatives from clubs are saying. With that in mind, the correspondence are coming. Announcement tomorrow.
Yes, indeed. And for those that don't know, we have 20 correspondents, one for every single club in the Premier League. And we'll be producing content with all of them. Watch this space for what we have coming up. That was it, James.
Nice job, Suj. Thank you very much.
Public service announcements, as always. Let's get through some of those, guys. For those that don't feel like you get enough of us with the 5 free podcasts we do every week, head over to patreon.com/planetfpl. We have a Slack channel. We have prize leagues available. We have exclusive articles from James. Get a Zoom call with James if you want as well. We have the socially distanced, don't we, James? Amongst a whole bunch of other stuff available for additional patrons. And we've got some really good announcements on that coming in the coming weeks as well. If you've thought about joining our Patreon and haven't yet, don't forget that if you do and you're thinking, do you know what, it's the end of the month, should I do it now? September is free. So anybody that signs up in the next 10 days won't be charged for September. And anybody that's already a patron, you also won't be charged for September as a special preseason kind of offer that we've rolled out. So do head over there. We'd love to have you on board. We're just about to tip over 250 people in that community. The Planet FPL army is growing. So why don't you get yourselves over and become a part of it? It's all good fun.
Couple of bits from me before we go as well.
Do it.
The mini league code for the Planet FPL podcast that's open to everybody, where like we did with Martin Janssen, we'll invite the winner onto the podcast next season. The mini league code is in the bio for this podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or whether you're listening to the audio. The mini league code is in the bio. If for whatever reason you can't find it, feel free to DM me. I've tweeted it before. Our Sky mini leagues are also open as well, and there's been a lot of new players showing interest in the Sky game this year. We do a podcast on Sky every Wednesday as well. We'd love to have you on board. If you're interested in that, I sent some details about Sky mini leagues last night on Twitter at Planet FPL Pod, or DM me anytime. My DMs are open to help. You know what my DMs are not open for?
Which Spurs asset should I buy?
Rate my fucking teams. What do you think of this? Great, mate. Next.
So yeah, no rate my teams. There we go. Wherever you're listening to the podcast, make sure you subscribe and what have you. And one other final, very brief announcement. As many of you know, James and I have been running this as a free to air and will continue to forevermore. But we are looking to work with a couple of partners or other businesses or anybody that wants to work on a partnership or sponsorship with the show. We'd love it to be people from our community. We're not really interested in going out and getting corporate sponsors or gambling money, but if you're a part of the Planet FPL community and be listening to the pod and think, do you know what, I have a business or product or service or something that I think could be valuable to other members of the community and it's something you want to talk about, then do get in touch. Like James said, either via DMs or email help@planetfpl.com, sujin@planetfpl.com, and we'll be interested to talk to you. We're not looking to work with hundreds of people, just a few, but we want people from our community and we want to be able to help people from our community reach other members of our community. And we won't say any more than that because we're not cha-ching. But do reach out because we would like to see what other people in our audience are doing and where we can help in any way. So do that. There we go. Simple announcement, James.
Well done. Thank you, Matt.
No worries, guys. Enjoy your weekend. We've got Champions League final to look forward to. Should be a great game with Bayern Munich and PSG.
Go on, Bayern.
And then we'll be back on Monday with the Chip special. So do stay tuned for that. Stay safe as always. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man-child.
Have you stopped recording, James?
No.
And just one other thing, James, that I think we need to tack on, because you said cue music, man-child. Man-child's birthday on Sunday. Happy birthday, motherfucker.
Happy birthday, motherfucker.